It's not up yet. It's going to be up at 4:10. Yeah, it's not up yet. I scheduled them to like show up at 10 minutes after 4. But you can think about what the answer is. How come it's so empty? Is there anything to today? Because like you're supposed to be done with everything, aren't you? No. All right. Say again. Oh, is that like today or
next Monday? Some people have to build it 3 days before the shoot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I do know I didn't build it was today. Yeah.
My bad.
All right. Well, apparently people are building bridges or something. But life goes on. So do the quiz. It should be. Do you see it? Is it up?
Yeah.
Okay. Well. All right. So question 2. So do people have opinions about what this is? Anyone? Yeah. Oh, then yes, I agree. So the thing about this, and you'll see questions like this on previous exams as well, because I'm mean, I guess. It kind of looks like it might be O(n) squared, but it isn't, right? The reason it isn't is that what are we doing here? We are repeating this block n times. How much time does this block take? Well, depends on the computer, but it's a constant amount of time, right? Because it just says repeat 100 times. The 100 is constant. It's always 100. So one way to think about it is the pass gets repeated 100 times n times, which is proportional to n, right? So, so that means it's O(n). So I did want to introduce one piece of notation that might not be obvious, and that's O(1). So all one, people also say constant time means it's not like the size of the input doesn't matter, right? So for example, here, like there's no input. It runs 100 times. So that's some kind of constant. What constant depends on the computer, but it's a constant. So we say of one, and by that we mean not proportional to any variable in particular. It's just constant time. Okay, so that's notation of one. Make sense? Questions about this? But the answer is over. All right. I did want to, yeah, so one thing, so there is an announcement on Piazza that went to you as well. So thank you. So yeah, so Professor David James, I didn't get to mention it last time. So he's sitting in on lectures this semester, kind of, you know, giving me mentoring and tips and stuff like that. And it was a great honor to have him demonstrate his siphon, tubeless siphon. So there is a video if you want to see it in there. So that's the old video from the 60s, I guess. There's going to be a new video as well. There's also a recording of the lecture. Unfortunately, like the frame is small and my hand was shaking a little bit. So it's not great, but there's going to be a new video that's going to be posted soon. If you've taken pictures with Professor James, please send him the photos. You know, as a previous chair of engineering science, he would like to have pictures with, you know, the current generation. If you want to take another picture, he's right there. So presumably you can do that as well. Hello. Is that the part of a bridge?
Yeah, no, we're gonna use it.
Yeah, cool. Okay. There is a quiz about it on Quarkus. So drop your wood thing and you know get to doing the quiz. Okay. So another thing I wanted to mention. So we have some you know, there's office hours. So there's like the usual lab session on Sunday. I guess there is 2 of them left for lab 9 and lab 10. Those are recorded and are on YouTube as well. But in addition to that, I wanted to have sessions. Some of them are going to be with me, some with TAs that are kind of extra help session. So not introducing any new material, but specifically aimed at people who are really struggling. So if you identify as a person who is struggling, which is like completely fine, this is for you. So please sign up so that we know how much interest there is. And also in the form, there is a question of what are you, you know, what do you want to hear about in particular? We'll try to tailor it to that. So depending on the demand, there might be, there will be, depending on demand, it's just a question of how much. There would be one-on-one sessions as well that you could book if you're, you know, like if you want kind of one-on-one help. You know, obviously, like if all 300 people want it, that's maybe not going to happen. But this is specifically aimed, like if you're struggling and if you feel like it could help, then please sign up. No promises, but we'll try to accommodate everyone. Okay. All right. So okay. All right. So this is that. So this is the form. All right. So what we're going to do today is just keep on going with complexity. There is a question on Discord. No, that's a yeah. I don't know how to make it so that the sound is just for the important stuff. So again, I'll refer you to the complexity notes. So if you feel like you want to read about it, I think that, so I mean, I wrote it, so you know everyone likes their own cooking, but you know I think it's good. You should read it. It's kind of like the lectures. So I'm taking the binary search from the notes. So this is the fancier binary search that basically is the same as what we had before. That's what you saw in the lab, of course. This basically accommodates the situation where E is not in the list so that you can return none if you didn't find E. So that's why it's a little bit more complex. Okay, so complex in the sense of more lines, the complexity is the same. So in fact, what I want to do now is analyze the complexity of the binary search. So I copy and pasted it. It's actually a little bit good that it didn't copy paste well because I want to spend time reading it. So while I'm fixing it up, read it. So again, to remind you, what we're doing is we have a list that's a sorted list, and we're looking for the element E. And we want to return the location of the element E if it is in the list. If it's not, then we're going to return none. The way we do it is we say we're looking in the list between the index low and the index high. And then what we do is we just say we start with low over here, high over here, and then we say, okay, like maybe we move high here, and then maybe we move low here, and maybe we move low here again, and then we move high. And eventually you will get to the point where low and high are the same thing, at which point we can just check, well, like, did we find it? This is this. And if we didn't, then we return none. So this is just saying high minus low is now at most 1. So we keep going while the difference between high minus low is greater than 2 or equal. And then when it's 1, we just say, okay, like we are now at the point where either it's at low or it's at high or it's not there at all. Does that make sense? Questions? Okay, so like we've done it a couple times and you have seen it in the lab, hopefully. So not going to dwell on it. I now want to ask, what is the complexity of that? So we've already done it kind of informally. I now want to do it more formally. So what's going on here? We are starting at this point. We're starting where low is 0 and high is this. And then we are repeating this some number of times. So the highlighted block of code is constant time, right? So we're doing, some comparisons, some lookups there, but there is nothing there which would like repeat 10 times or something, right? So if we want to ask, what is the runtime of this proportional to? The answer is, well, it's approximately proportional to the number of times that you run this block. And then there is this thing, which doesn't take very long and is just constant time. And there is this thing, which is also constant time. So when we're asking again, like what you see on the exam is the simple form of the asymptotic worst case runtime complexity. So I have to say it just because like small print, otherwise people are going to say, it's and I'm going to say tight upper bound. And I have to say all of that. What I mean is in the worst case, what is the runtime proportional to? So worst case means, you don't return early in this case. Right? Because in principle, it could be that the element E is right in the middle and you return right away. So that's not interesting. Does that make sense? So asymptotic means for large n. Because if n is small, then, there's all sorts of things that are going on. Like maybe this part is actually significant if n is small, stuff like that. What I'm saying is if n is large, which means that most of the time that the function is executing, it's just repeating this block. That's not going to be the case if n is small. It's going to, like, the other parts are also going to be significant. Does that make sense? Questions? Okay. So that's asymptotic. Tight upper bound means you don't get to say, oh, it's like O of n to the n to the n to the n, because it definitely runs slower than that. Technically, it would be correct if you didn't have to give a tight upper bound, right? Because technically, Like if T of n is n squared, this is O of n to the n to the n, whatever, right? And that's just because it grows much slower than n to the n to the n. So that's technically true, which is why on the exam I say, no, you got to give me a tie-type of bound, in which case just saying n to the n to the n to the n to everything is not the right answer. Does that make sense? So I say the simple form because I don't want you to say like O of 50 n squared plus 1, which again would technically be the same as O of n squared, right? So I want the simplest form. Do all those words now make sense to people? Yeah. So it's not equal. It's that this n to the n to the n grows very, very fast, right? And technically saying something is O of something is saying the left-hand side grows at most as fast as the right-hand side, right? So it's kind of like a smaller equal rather than an equal. Does that make sense? Well, not everything, but like n squared grows like way slower than n to the n to the n, and O means O means it grows at most as fast. So it's like so analogous to smaller equal, right? And in fact, like mathematically, what it means is like for large n. So I'm going into the weeds because people are asking. So what it means is like for large n, all right, times. Right? So it's kind of like a smaller equal, and it's a smaller equal exactly in this sense, right? That if the right-hand side grows very, very fast, even if B is very tiny, eventually the right-hand side is going to overtake the left-hand side. Yes. So this is what I mean by tie-type bond is like, don't do stuff like that. Like if the runtime is like it's something, it's like 5 plus, 1 to 3 times n squared. What I say is don't say O of n cubed, even though that would be correct if you didn't need a tie-type upper bound. Say O of n squared. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes. Say again? I mean, it's right here. This is just the input. Right? So T of n is like the runtime if the input is n. Does that make sense? All right. Let me check if the Discord is something interesting. If it was 2n, etc. Yeah, so like if it were for I in range n, for j in range n, that would be O of n squared. That's the example from last time. Yes. Wouldn't length be O of n? No, it wouldn't. So you could imagine that this is a good question, actually. So you could imagine that the list works in such a way that length of list needs to go through the entire list to check where the last element is, but that's not how lists work in Python. It actually says in the beginning of where the list is written what the length is. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Yeah.
You're just like saying what the degree of the.
So like tie-type bound is this, right? It just says like don't like even though big O means small or equal, like don't play around with this. Just
like the lowest.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So sometimes like so the reason it's and this is kind of the usual way that people say it, so that's how we say it. The reason we say tie-type bound is that sometimes you do need an upper bound. So it's not like exactly the complexity, but it's like just a little bit larger. Sometimes you have to do it. In those examples that didn't come up yet, but it will in the future. Okay. All right. Okay, so just to check. Okay, so who is not okay with this? Okay. Who is not okay with this? Okay, why not? Okay. So the question is, what does worst case mean? So worst case means you are given an input of size n in some sense. Sometimes the function will run very fast. Sometimes it's going to run very slow. In this example, that's going to happen, right? Because in this example, sometimes the element is right in the middle between high and low, and it'll return right away. In the worst case, the element is not there at all, so it will have to go through the entire thing of making high being close to low. So that's the worst case. Make sense? All right. Who is not okay with this? Anyone? Great. Who is not okay with this? Okay, why not? So simple form, it's a little bit vague, but here it means like don't say, don't say like, oh, 50 yen, say, oh, then. So like give me like the simplest, just like the shortest form. Make sense? All right. So we are left with this, which I'm about to explain again. Everything else we already covered, and nobody except the one guy objected. So thank you though for the questions. Like it's good. Like there are good questions. Okay. So what are we asking here? Again, like we're saying, basically the thing that repeats a lot of times, how many times does it repeat? Okay. And the answer as well, like unlike the quiz question, here it's a little bit complicated because there is no like for I in range n where we say, well, it runs n times. We don't know, right? So how did we figure it out? So we said, okay, so we noticed that what matters here is when low and high become either the same or have a difference of 1. So our question is like, how many iterations is it going to take for high to become approximately equal to low, right? So we'll say, okay, so high minus low, so the difference starts as n minus 1 because n is length of L. Makes sense? And low is 0, high is n minus 1, so the difference is n minus 1. And then, so this is kind of like not like this is, it's in every textbook. It's not like an easy thing to figure out if you look at it for the first time. But the idea here is what I described before, right? So you have the range every time, approximately. So high minus low becomes approximately n over 2 because either you go like this or you go like this. And then it becomes n over 4. And then it becomes n over 8, and so on, until it becomes 1. And this is the kind of thing that we saw multiple times already. How many times does it need to go until it becomes approximately 1? Well, log 2n. Make sense? So we have approximately log 2n iterations. So that means that this algorithm, so binary search, runs in approximately time that's proportional to log 2n. Why is that? Well, because if n is large, like what matters is how many times this loop repeats. How many times does this loop repeat? Log 2n times. So what's going to be the constant of proportionality, anyone, actually? So I'm claiming this algorithm runs in the worst case in time that's proportional to log 2n. So proportional to log 2n means, it's some constant time times log 2n milliseconds. Yes. Okay, so the question was like, why does this range become approximately n over 2? The reason is this is the structure of the algorithm, right? So we start with a list. Whatever. And initially this is low and this is high, right? And then what we do is we either move low to the middle or we move high to the middle, right? So it might be that low is this, or it might be that it moves like this. And then we do it again, right? So either low goes to the middle or high goes to the middle. So maybe it becomes like this, right? So every time we move one or the other so that the range between low and high becomes smaller by a factor of 2. Make sense? So, okay. So what I was asking before is, okay, so I'm claiming the runtime is proportional to log 2n. So that means that the runtime is some constant approximately times log 2n. So I'll add a tilde here just to say that it's approximate. So what is this constant, like in words? Sorry, I'll make this a little bit smaller so we can see. So in words, like if I ask you, what is this constant? What are the units of the constant? If I write it like this, anyone? There's only one unit over there, so it's not a hard question. What are the yes? Yeah, it's milliseconds. Yeah, thank you. Well, because like the milliseconds must have come from somewhere, right? So, and it's not log 2n, which is just a number. So what is this constant? It's like some number of milliseconds. What is that number of milliseconds in English? Anyone? Yeah. Exactly. So it's like on the particular computer, how long does it take to repeat one iteration of this loop? Thank you. Yeah, does that make sense? So, okay, so that's what it means. And we write it as O of log n. So that's a little bit simpler than log 2n, and that's just a property of the logarithms. They're actually all proportional to each other, right? So this is just like how logarithms work. So like if you say like log y of x, that's equal to log x divided by log y, right? Do people know this? So that, and like, is it like log base 10 or log base e? Doesn't matter actually, because they're all proportional, right? So this is proportional to, I'll write it as like 1 divided by log y times log x. So this is proportional to log x. where the constant of proportionality is 1 over log y. So for that reason, like you can write, it's not a problem if you write like log base 2n, but doesn't matter. We just write log because all the logs are proportional to each other. Yeah. Is that okay? All right. Let me check Discord. What's going on here? Okay. Well, Nick is apparently on Discord. That's good. Why does n equals length of L? We just defined it that way. Like that's like we just like it's notation, right? So I just said like O of n for n equals length of L. I could have said directly O of length of L. Okay. Is there another? So why was there O of n cubed? So like tight upper bound means that if the runtime is proportional to n squared, you need to say O of n squared rather than O of n cubed. Okay. Okay, someone is typing. Okay, thank you. Okay, hi, Mr. Cheese. Hello. Okay. So, all right. So, I want to introduce a new algorithm because so far we've just seen, binary search, O of log n, linear search, O of n. We've seen it the other day. I now want to introduce a non-fake O of n squared algorithm. And this is the task of sorting a list. So what would that look like? Whatever, we have a list that's not sorted. And of course, Python has a built-in sort, right? So what we're doing now is just implementing stuff that, like, in fact, this is not going to be extremely efficient. Like you could, of course, just say, like, if you need to do it, if you have a list, you can do like sorted of L and it's now sorted. That's all fine. So the idea here is we want to do something, by ourselves in the same way that you're building a bridge that I certainly hope that I don't have to like cross a river walking on it or anything. So not until you get your PH. Okay. So, all right. So what are we doing? Here's one idea. This is called selection sort. This is called selection sorting. And there is like some variations in terms of how people name those things. So the idea is like this. Pick the largest element, put it in position n, right? Largest. And then pick the next largest one and put it in position n minus 2. And then the next largest and put it in position n minus 3. If you keep doing that, the list is going to become sorted. Make sense? So let's do it with this list. And then we'll write the code to do it. So here, what's the largest element? It's 100. It's already in its right place. So not doing anything. So now we're going to look at the part of the list that's still not sorted. And we're going to say, what's the largest element here? Well, it's 12. So what we're going to do is we're going to put 12 where it belongs over here. We need to put 1 somewhere, so we'll just swap it with 12. Okay. So that means that the next time what's going to happen is we swap the 1 and the 12. And now we're going to look over here. So what's the largest element over here? Well, it's the 10. So we're going to put the 10 where it belongs, and we're going to put 2 in place of the 10. So it's going to be like this. Largest element is 5, swap it with 3. Largest element is 3, swap it with 1. Oops. Largest element is 2. It's already in its correct place. And what's left is just the 1, which is definitely in its right place, because if all the n-1 largest elements are already in their correct place, the smallest one has got to be in the right place as well. So we're done and it's sorted. Okay. So that's the output. Does that like make sense conceptually? Questions? Yeah. Can you speak? Yeah, so that's because so the question was, why are those the same? And the answer is, we looked at this guy and we decided it's already in its right place. Right? Say it? So we n is just the size of the list. Right? So we're just saying, well, like, what's the largest element? Well, it turns out to be 100. Well, we should put it in position at -1. We did that. The list didn't change because 100 was already there. Make sense? Other questions? All right. So let's write this. So we call it selection sort. So what do we need to do? We need to go n-1 times n-1, because the last time the element is already there. So n-1 is enough. And now what we're going to do is we got to go up to I, find the location of the maximum, and put it in its right position. Right? So what we need to do is what we've done before. If you remember, when we did like location of the maximum, that's what we need. Right? So we're just going to do it. So current max is 0, and so L at 0 and current max I is 0. So initially, the largest element that we've seen is the one that's in position 0. And now we're going to say, okay, sorry, I'm going to call it J. So now I'm saying for J in range, so I got to go through the list. So let's say that I'm here. So I need to go between 0 and 10, right? So I don't want to go up to the end, because at the end I have stuff that's already in the correct position. So where do I need to go here? So I'm looking for the location of the maximum. So the first time I need to go up to the end, right? So the first time, this should be length of L. And then the second time, it's smaller by 1. And then it's smaller by 1 again. So in general, it's going to be length of L minus I. Right? So when I is 0 in the first iteration, we're just going up to the end, up to length of L minus 1. The second time, whatever it was, -1. The third time, whatever it was, -2. Okay? And now we're doing our usual thing. So if L at J is greater than current max. Current max is L of J. And current max J is J. And we're done. So at this point, current max J is the location of the element we need to swap to the right. Make sense? So if I'm over here, what I'm doing is I'm looking for the location J of the largest element. What is the answer? So what's current max J for this after I run the loop? Anyone? Current max J is the location of the largest element. What's the location of the largest element over here? Well, I know you know, someone else. Yeah. Anyone? The location of the largest element of the highlighted part of the list. Oh, no. Yeah, yeah. Yes, 2. Thank you very much. Yes, exactly. So the location of the largest element is 2 because 12 is in position 2. Okay. I feel like I know it's like 450, but does this not make sense to anyone? Yes.
N is, how does it just know that N is?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a very good point. I meant length of L. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Why are we looking for like the 12? Like, why don't we check if the 100 is correct first?
We do check if the so what I was saying is like when we are over here, we're looking for the 12. When we're over here, we're looking for the 100. Okay. So, okay. So what do we do then? So what we need to do is we need to swap current max J to the right. So what are we swapping it with? So initially this would be length of L minus 1. Then it would be length of L minus 2. Then it would be length of L minus 3. So that means that this is length of L minus I minus 1, right? The way I figure it out is initially, what do I want to swap with? I want to swap with this. This is at location length of L minus 1. And initially, I is equal to 0. Yeah. So, okay. So we swap. And we are done. Yeah. So let's run this. So I'm taking the list. I'm saying selection sort L, putting a breakpoint here. We're over here. We're going in. So initially, this is L. Okay. So what's my goal right now? My goal right now is to look at this entire list and find the location of the largest element and put it at the end. It so happens that the largest element is already at the end, but I don't know that. Make sense? So looking, and eventually, so I'll just put the breakpoint here and I'll run through it because all I'm doing is I'm trying to find the location of the 100 right now. So current max J is 6. Length of L minus I minus 1, also 6. So I'm gonna be swapping the 100 with 100 initially. Make sense? Is that okay, everyone? Cool. So, all right. So next time, what am I doing? So I'm over here. So the list is the same because I swapped the 100 with 100. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the 1 rather than up to the 100. And I'm going to look for the location of the largest element. The location of the largest element, like you said, is 2. Right? So what I expect, press continue so that I go to line 36, is that Kermax J is 2. Right? So what that means is that if I look at the list and I go up to the second to last element, the location of the largest one is going to be 2. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap this with its correct location. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. And then I'm just going to keep going n-1 times until the list is sorted. So remove the breakpoints. Keep going. Just press continue. Voila. Wait. Does that make sense? So, okay. So what's the runtime complexity of this? So this is a little bit interesting because what's going on here is, well, we are repeating this a lot of times. The question is how many times, right? So one way to approach this is to do the thing that wouldn't work in the first question on the quiz, is to say, well, it's a nested loop, got to be O of n squared. In this case, this happens to be correct, but there is a complication, right? Because it's not the case that the inner loop runs the same amount of times every time, right? So how many times does the inner loop run for n equals length of L? And the answer is, well, initially it runs n times, and then n-1, and then n-2, and so on, right? So that's the answer, is it runs n plus n-1 plus n-2 plus 1 times. Yeah? Does that make sense? Questions about it? Is objections to this? So the one objection is, okay, like that's not a formula. It has like a ... in there. But this is just, the arithmetic series. So if you recall, or if you don't recall or don't know, then this is just a formula. So this is one of the 2 formulas that I absolutely will have you memorize, because you need to know it, and the time to memorize might as well be now. So that's just the formula. That's how it works. Okay. So that means that the inner loop runs this many times just because, it's the same, just going the other way, right? And that means that it runs, n squared over 2 plus n over 2 times. Just the same, just the math. And that means that it's proportional to n squared for large n. So that means that selection sort runs in O of n squared time, where n is the length of the list. Make sense? So it happens that the intuition for it's a nested loop, it's got to be O of n squared. In this case, it's correct. We'll see later examples, like we saw in the quiz, where this intuition fails you. You got to do the math. Okay. All right. So the thing I want to leave you with is binary search is really good. It's really fast. Log of n is like, it grows very slowly. Like log of a billion base 10 is just 9. N squared grows really fast. So if you think about, Robert's library, how many volumes does it have? I actually forgot to look it up for today, but let's say 500,000. It's something like that, right? So if you were to try to sort the books in Roberts using selection sort, you will never be done. 500,000 squared is a lot. How do you sort? Somehow people sorted them, so it must be that there is a better algorithm. There is. I'll tell you about it on Monday. I'll see you. Bye.